Welcome to the second part of the Vespa restoration. Last time we went from this to this, and I finished off with a bit of blasting, so let's pick up from there. With the rims and hubs blasted clean, I'm now going to powder coat them in a nice gloss silver. But before I do that, they need a quick bake to outgas, and this will also bake out any oils that may be hiding in the metals. And while that's baking, let's tear the engine down. Now that doesn't look like a 70 cylinder head to me. This might look like a complicated setup, but it's actually very simple. Now it's time to pull the flywheel. And like I said before, doing this job with the proper tools makes all the difference. As I said in episode 1, I bought this Vespa as a non-runner with electrical faults, and it would appear that this mess of wiring on the stator is probably the culprit, but we'll get on to fixing that later on. I'll know more about the clutch's condition a little later on when I open it up for inspection. The plot thickens. So, the cylinder head is brand new, and from Polini, well known for their tuning parts, so that instantly makes me think that this engine isn't the 125cc that it claims to be. But what is strange is that the head and piston are clearly brand new, but the barrel has been used. I wonder if the engine blew up at some point and destroyed the head and piston. Let's take a quick measure of the bore to see what we're dealing with. Yep, as I thought, bigger than standard. So what we have here isn't a 125, but a 177cc. I wonder if it's been jetted to suit too. Apart from being a bit rusty, the cylinder is in lovely condition. So you can see a lot clearer now that the piston and rings are brand new, and apart from a little scrape on the crown, it's perfectly reusable for the rebuild. Well, apart from a little rust from sitting idle for years, the internals of the engine look in really good shape, and there doesn't appear to be any accumulation of glitter in the casings either, so all in all, I think it's a pretty healthy engine. And with the removal of the gear set and crankshaft, that's the engine broken down as much as I need it to be. There's not much to these engines really, especially when compared to my VFR 400 engine build. So now, let's put the tools away and start the next stage of the restoration. To restore the alloy casings back to their original finish, I'm going to fire them into the Vapor Blaster. I think we can all agree that these casings look 100% better. Now to give the cylinder a quick blast and the shot blaster. And with it blasted clean, I'm going to protect it from rust again by using some of the Cerakote I have left over from the TY250 restoration. While the barrel is baking, I'm going to press in the new engine bearings and seals. Usually I would freeze the bearings and heat the casings so that the bearings just drop in, but since this isn't a high stress Ducati race bred engine, pressing them in will be just fine. Before fitting the crank seal, the bearing retainers need to be installed so that the bearing doesn't move out of place when I'm tapping in the seal. I always like to freeze the crank before installation. It just makes the job that little bit easier. When using paper gaskets, I always like to run a bead of Hylamar around the casings, just to have that extra fail-safe against leaks, especially on the crankcase halves. These mini circlip pliers are worth their weight in gold. The next stage of the build up is fitting new clutch plates, and in order to get the best performance and longest lifespan, I will have a little read of the instructions. So while the plates are soaking, I'm going to get the barrel out of the oven and back onto the engine. I don't think I could have applied that build oil any worse. Again, this small mark on the piston crown won't affect the running of the engine one bit. I could remove it, but that's a silly thing to do, as I would be removing material and effectively making the compression ratio lower, and that's not what I want to be doing with only 177cc to play with. I'm reusing the original plug that came with the bike for the initial start up, because as you see here, it's brand new. The porcelain is still pure white, so it would be very wasteful not to use it, although I am going to make sure it's properly gapped. Well, the clutch plates look in great shape, but it's still wise to replace them as they could be very old and ready to disintegrate. Plus, replacements are cheap, so it would be crazy not to. You can rebuild the clutch using a vise, but I found it way easier to use the press instead. With the installation of the clutch cover, that's pretty much all of the mechanical side of things taken care of. Now, onto the fuel delivery system, otherwise known as a carburetor. Usually at this point I would do my little carb braking gag, but since I've never worked on one of these before, I think I'll play it safe. It's not looking too bad so far, just a little bit of varnished petrol, but no real dirt. And with the removal of the slide, that's the carb stripped and ready for cleaning. With the carburetor back in place, it's time for the last job, fixing the stator. So now I'm going to tackle fixing the stator. Now apparently the windings and stuff never go wrong, it's always the wiring on these Vespas, which you can see is very true. It's all crumbling and falling to bits. So what I'm going to do is desolder all these wires, take them out and replace them with this new kit of wires I have that are already pre-terminated and heat shrunk and everything. So let's crack on with that. Well, that's the first new wire in place. Now to deal with the rest. Well, that's that rewired. Now to get it back on the engine. Well, the engine is now rebuilt and ready for action, but before I can put it back in the frame, I need to fit the new rear shock. The old one wasn't leaking, but again, for the price of a replacement, it just makes sense. So at 40 minutes long, I think it may be time to call this episode done. But I hope you will join me again next time in the final episode of this mini-series to see the Vespa finished and driving around. See you all again soon.